Hello Year 7 and welcome back to your music lessons. This is your second lesson on African djembe music and rhythm. Before we start the lesson, just a quick reminder, any videos you're looking for can be found on the school YouTube channel. This one, as you probably know because you're watching this, will probably be titled Year 7 Music Lesson. When uploading your work to class charts, you can upload it with a Word document, a PowerPoint. You can screenshot your work and upload it then, or you can take a picture of any written work and upload it. Any way works. Along with that, last week I set you a research project. This was on African djembe music. The deadline for this work is the 12th of the 2nd, 21. So that's the 12th of February. So you have about 4 weeks to finish and submit this project. So you've still got a bit of time, but please make sure that you continue to plug away with it, because I do not want you to be having to try and do it all within the last hour of the last week, because it probably won't be up to the standard that we're all hoping to get. Along with that, please make sure you complete any previous lessons, as they will help you with the coming lessons as well. For this lesson is to understand texture and why it is important to a song. So at the very least today, the red box on the left, at the very least you should be able to understand and explain what texture is. Once you've done that, the yellow box in the middle, you should be able to identify the difference between a thin and a thick texture and the effect that these give. So there's two different types of textures we're looking into today, thin and thick. And then the green box on the right, once you're able to do the red and the yellow box, you should be able to suggest your own music and highlight the importance of texture and describe why it's important to have these different textures. So what is texture? Now texture refers to the layers of sound in a piece of music. So you can have a song with just one sound, like a solo singer singing all on their own, or you could have a song with multiple layers of sound, like a massive orchestra where you have 30 plus instruments all layering up and playing at the same time. With the different amounts of layers, we refer to it as either having a thin or a thick texture. So again, a thin texture is where there's not many sounds, like that solo singer. An example of a thin texture I've given you is Perfect by Ed Sheeran. It uses only guitar and vocals, so there's not much to it. It's just the guitar and vocals layered together, two sounds, two instruments. And this gives it the song kind of a relaxed, personal feeling, having a thin texture. And the thick texture, there's a lot of different sounds created by many instruments. So this is where we're talking about the orchestra. We can have 30 plus sounds. An example of a thick texture I've given you as well is a song called Ride of the Valkyries by a guy called Wagner. It uses loads of instruments, giving it this big sound as a result, big orchestral sound. So your first task, I'd like you to listen to these two pieces of music, the ones that I've underlined on the PowerPoint, and I'd like you to reference and listen to their two textural differences, the difference between not many instruments and the difference between a whole mass of instruments. I've put a link to each song, a YouTube link to each song, in the link in the notes below of this PowerPoint. Once you've done that, your next task, this is titled Changing Texture. So I'd like you to listen to a song. The song is called In the Hall of the Mountain King. It's by a guy called Grieg. I'd like you to make sure you listen to this song from the very start to the very finish. And again, I've put a link to the YouTube video in the notes below. Once you have listened to this song, I would like you to write a short essay describing how the texture changes throughout the piece of music. So we've talked about thin and thick texture, and you've looked into those different thin and thick textures, but I'd like to start thinking about how a texture might change throughout a whole song. So when you listen to In the Hall of the Mountain King, I'd like you to think about and write about what feelings do you think the song is trying to get across by changing this texture. How does it make you sort of feel? What feelings do you think he's trying to get across with his song? How does the song changing create these feelings? So how does it change? Does it change from like a thin texture to a thick texture, or a thick texture to a thin texture? And what feelings does this create through those changes? And then lastly, carrying on from last lesson, can you also try and write about pulse and rhythm? How does the song change the pulse and the rhythm of the song to create any sort of feelings as well? So please write about the changes that you hear in texture and maybe rhythm, and then write about the effects that these changes create. Once you have done that, take your time with it, then move on to your last task. This task is to write down a song of your choice. When you write down a song of your choice, please make sure to reference when you write it so I can read it, the artist and the song so I can find it easy enough when I want to listen to it. Then once you've chosen your song, I'd like you to describe the texture of your chosen piece. So when you're describing the texture of your chosen piece, it's much like we just did with the Hall of the Mountain King piece. I'd like to think about, is it a thin or a thick texture? Is there not many instruments creating a thin texture? Is there loads of instruments creating a thick texture? Once you've listened to that, you sort of get an idea of it. What effect or emotion does this give to the song? So what effect or emotion does a thick texture give to the song? And then I like to think about how the texture of the song changes. So songs change texture quite often. So I'd like to think about, does the song, it would be a bit boring if the song stayed the same texture the whole way through. So I'd like to have a think about, does it go from a thin texture to a thick texture, and what effect does this give to the song? Once you've completed all three of those tasks, I'd like you to continue with your Djembe research project. The criteria and examples, as you know, can be found on class charts, homework under research project. For this lesson, I think you should be completing slides 3 and 4 during this lesson. It does not need to be uploaded yet, as we said, but you need to make sure you remain consistent with it so that you have the work ready for the 12th of February. That's the deadline. So please don't leave it all to the last minute. Apart from that, well done. Keep working on, and I will talk to you soon for your next lesson.